had quite the experience going to see Violent Night, and I'm going to share it with you because I feel it's indicative of this film. So I had an extra ticket to the press screening, and my mom was out of town, so after work, during the week, my dad was just kind of bumming around. He didn't have much to do, so I was like, hey, Dad, do you want to go see Violent Night with me? And my dad's a good sport, and he loves movies. Both my parents love movies. They got me into movies, and I still go with them all the time to see films. So he was like, sure, I'd love to go. Now, it was very last minute, so he didn't really know what he was seeing or, who was in it. And he was like, who's David Harbour again? And I was like, he's in Stranger Things. And my dad is like, no, my dad doesn't care for Stranger Things that much. I know. But he was like, yeah, I'll go see this movie with you, sure. And I was excited. I was like, Dad, it's a Christmas movie. Look at the poster. We're going to have a great time. So the movie starts, and for about 5 minutes, it seems really fun and magical. And I was like, I done good. I'm so happy I took my dad to this movie. It's another Christmas keeper for the holiday movie collection. But then, really, just after 5 minutes, it becomes just so super gross and violent. I was shocked. I was like, whoo, I bit off a little bit more than I can chew, it turns out. Like, I have a friend who loves Christmas so much and doesn't like anyone to disrespect Christmas. She takes it very seriously. And I was like, whoo, good thing she's not watching this movie right now. Because, I love the poster so much, and I love David Harbour. I've been talking this movie up to everybody I know. And she was skeptical, and I was like, she was right. Now, my dad next to me is like super quiet. He's so quiet. Now, to be fair, I did tell him before the movie started that you can't talk during a press screening. Now, my dad likes to talk during movies. Or dance in your seat to the Christmas music, no matter how good it is, which is what he did when the movie kicked off, in the first 5 minutes when it was really magical and wonderful. But again, super quiet, just super, super quiet, really quiet. The whole theater was quiet pretty much. You could hear like, a pin drop. So I got real nervous, and I'm like scared that my dad afterwards is going to be like, I can't believe you took me to that movie and made me sit through it. So the lights come up. It was a very empty press screening, actually, because at the same time there was one very far away that John Leguizamo was showing up to do like an interview. But I didn't want to travel that far, and this other screening was just so super convenient. But there was literally like 4 or 5 other people in the screening. So we're the last ones in the theater. Everybody just gets up and leaves. The lights come up, and I turn to my dad, and I'm like, so what did you think? And my dad goes, loved it. He loved the movie. He absolutely adored it. I was shocked, but also very happy that he had such a good time. In fact, Universal sent me a Violent Night t-shirt that I just got, and I'm going to give it to my dad. I told him about it. I'm like, this t-shirt's coming your way. And he's like, oh boy. He's now a big David Harbour fan. He knows who David Harbour is now. So that was really fun. So the movie isn't for everyone. And some people might go in thinking they're going to love it and then be like, it's too much for me. And some people might not feel they're super into it, but then be like totally blown away. So it's interesting. It's really interesting. But again, my dad just absolutely loved this movie. Now, dark Christmas movies have been around for a while, and my dad's never liked a dark Christmas movie before either, to be honest. So I was really surprised. I didn't know where this totally came from that he liked the movie so much. He does like action movies, though, but so do I. All right, so anyway, dark Christmas movies have been around for a while, but the only 2 that I've really enjoyed are The Ref and Batman Returns. But even still, I don't watch them every year. In fact, my family vetoed Batman Returns as a Christmas movie because they were like, it's too dark. We don't like it. They like Batman Returns, but they don't want to watch it at Christmas time. So, usually we go for the happier, lighter Christmas movies. But those are 2 I still think are good. This one, I wouldn't watch it again, but I do think that it is without a doubt a fantastic calling card for David Harbour. He is the reason to see this movie. He is a perfect kick-ass Santa, who's actually also depressed in this movie about the greed in the world. And I found that commentary to be actually really interesting. I was like, he has a point. He didn't need to throw up on that lady, but he has a point. Something else the movie comments on, and this surprised me, the hypocrisy of Home Alone. And if you're like, yes, well then, yeah, this is the movie for you. They actually recreate and reference Home Alone, I guess because maybe they get away with the parody law, but And it really is almost like, that's another good way to describe this movie. Like that Winnie the Pooh, because, Winnie the Pooh is now in public domain. So, someone made that Blood and Honey movie, and like that is to Christmas what that movie is to Winnie the Pooh. It's so funny. But they actually recreate several of the famous traps from Home Alone, yet show the actual damage they would inflict and the actual reactions of pain and in some cases death. And that's all shown here. And I was like, I didn't need to see all that in that kind of level of detail, but you have a point. So this movie was making points left and right. It was just kind of squeamish. And again, this movie is definitely a star vehicle for David Harbour. It highlights his charisma, his ability as an action hero, his humor, his heart of gold, his sexy dad bod, all the qualities that made him famous in Stranger Things. But also, this movie highlights the questionable choices that he sometimes makes for himself in many areas. I would say David Harbour has a very unique fashion sense, a surprising fashion sense, because again, the character he plays on Stranger Things, you wouldn't expect him to dress that way. But he's an actor. Stranger Things is a role. And I would say that, this movie is a little bit closer to who David Harbour really is. Like, this is the Santa for a guy who wears this mustache. And I say that with love, but also as a very accurate statement. It's a charming movie. It's funny, the more I talk about it, and I guess because my dad had such a good time, I have fond memories of it. But again, I wouldn't watch it. I wouldn't watch it again. But maybe it's worth seeing one time, especially because tis the season. Now, my biggest problem with the movie, also that's another thing. Outside of David Harbour, is not a great movie. All right, so my biggest problem was that besides the crassness, and I'm not a big fan of Crass. I've always felt that Crass is a cheap joke. It's like, come on, go all the way. Crass is like just a way to kind of like peace out and put in not enough of an effort. But so it's the same problem that I had with 87 North's Day Shift. This is the production company started by Chad Stahelski and David Leitch. And if only everything they produced was at the level of John Wick. But as we all know, that is seldom actually the case. So like Day Shift, if you've seen Day Shift, this is the Christmas version of Day Shift. You know exactly what you're going to be getting. So that movie and this movie sometimes seem more like stunt shows than actual movies. And it's weird. Here, some of the sets are better. Some of the sets here are actually really elaborate. Like, they did a nice job with the Christmas decorating, but only in some rooms. In other parts of the house, this takes place almost entirely at this house, like Home Alone, which is funny. But other parts of the house, the bare minimum effort is made. And you can almost see this, like the slats, like it's not even a real house. Like it's just a set they like very hastily and shoddily assembled so they'd have a place to fight. And you're like, come on, man, build a real, the Home Alone house is also not real. If you've ever watched the movies that made us on Netflix, behind the scenes, they built that in a school gymnasium, the interiors. And they looked amazing. You would think it was a real house. That is not the case here. So Home Alone's like, see? We did some, we earned our hypocrisy. The VFX at points are quite good, but they're used very sparingly. If this movie had another $5 to $10 million, maybe that would have helped not only the VFX, but some of the sets. I'd be like, are we doing this or are we doing this? Like, come on, give us just a couple more $1 million. I think it would make the difference of this being maybe a bigger hit. And like a niche hit, for people who just like dark Christmas movies. Also, it's just really over-the-top violent, and again, as I said, gross. That's another problem with it. I think that's going to limit its audience. I think that at first it seemed to me like Santa does Die Hard. That, I think, would have been a much bigger hit with broader appeal. But this is almost more of a horror movie, which, again, will find its audience. But, if they'd worked on the taste factor and spent a little bit more money, they could have had, I think, maybe a really big hit here. So that's also something, to me, that's a little frustrating. Some people will just be like, I love it the way it is, Grace. Don't touch it. But I look at this, I put like on my producer glasses, and I'm like, there's something here with David Harbour and some of the elements. There's something here. And if I, if I just given a little bit more money and reined in the script a little bit so that it wasn't so over the top in the crassness and the violence, I could have maybe had another Die Hard. It is very Christmassy with some good holiday jokes, a great Christmas soundtrack. They spent some money there, and a very unique backstory for Santa Claus that I actually kind of really liked. It made my audience, it was one of the rare times my audience laughed. They were like, I think some of them were laughing because they thought it was ridiculous, but I was like, no, I actually kind of like this. And I wish they'd done more with it. They clearly would like to do a sequel. And that's interesting. I wouldn't watch this movie again, but I would try a sequel. Also, they tease Mrs. Claus. I'm like, who's going to be Mrs. Claus? Oh, I'd love to see who they pick. Maybe they're like, that's the deal. You hope you have a big hit, and then you can convince a name actress maybe to come in and be Mrs. Claus because you're like, everybody liked the first one. There's a charm to it, and I would be curious what they would do with another one. That I think I would advise someone. I would advise an actress to play Mrs. Claus in this, actually, in a sequel. The script has some clever twists, some very clever twists, particularly in the third act. I was surprised they got me. I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And I liked the commentary, again, about greed in the world, particularly with Christmas and asking for gifts. And then also the stuff about Home Alone. As I said, they have a point. But then some of the jokes are just bad, going more for shock value than being actually funny. Like some of the relatives, like at the beginning, I was like, come on. I felt even bad for the actress having to deliver those lines. Now, aside from David Harbour, Alex Hassel is great and just quirky enough as the father of Trudy, a very good Leah Brady, who loves Home Alone. While Cam Gigandet, as a D-list actor, has some pretty good jokes about Hollywood. If you know anything about Hollywood, or you watch this channel, right, and then you know a lot about Hollywood, you'll get them. They were very funny. When I don't even want to spoil it, but there was some stuff which was very inside baseball, which I thought was funny. Alexis Louder also has some good moments towards the end of the movie. In the beginning, she doesn't seem like she can act, but at the end, she did a nice job. And as for henchmen, Brendan Fletcher really brought it. He was like, are we making a dark Christmas movie? Let's do this. I love it. And then Mildred Suri, who's clearly not an actress and is a stunt person, she had a great costume, which did a lot of her work for her. And she got to do some of the Home Alone recreations. And she did a very nice job. And of course, not only recreating the traps from Home Alone, but, how they'd actually go down. So, she did a nice job. You have to execute that well. But as they say, a hero is only as good as their villain. Just ask John McClane, who had one of the best villains of all time. While here, John Leguizamo's Mr. Scrooge is just John Leguizamo with a bad and overly complicated backstory. So the role itself isn't good. I don't think anyone could have done a good job in this role unless they demanded a rewrite on set and been like, this is bad. To craft services table and let's bang out a better role. And Johnny Legs, he doesn't do anything with it. He just is kind of like collecting a paycheck, pretty much. Also, Beverly D'Angelo, and it took me a while to figure out that was Beverly D'Angelo. She, of course, is a Christmas movie icon, thanks to National Lampoon. I watch that every year. I love that movie. So I know who Beverly D'Angelo is. But here I was like, I knew she had to be famous. At first I was like, that's not Melanie Griffith, is it? But then I was like, I think it's Beverly D'Angelo. And then when the credits rolled, I was like, it is Beverly D'Angelo. Wow, she looks very different. So not only was she, so I don't really know the benefit of casting her as Christmas movie royalty when you can't recognize her. But her role is just a stream of unfunny profanities that go way too far with no payoff. I mean, that was really cringe. She has this monologue and I was like, this isn't even funny. It's just tough to sit through. I'm like, this is like cheap Succession. If you're going to swear a string of profanities, you better do Logan Roy proud. So if Violent Night is for you. You've been listening to this review. If you're like, sign me up. But just remember, because here's the thing. I think some people are going to be like, because like me, you'll be like, I don't know, Grace. I love Christmas. I love David Harbour. The trailer has some funny bits. I'm going to go for it. Just remember that I think a lot of people are going to walk out of this movie. If you work in a movie theater, I'd be curious to know what the experience of your customers is. So this isn't Stranger Things or MCU David Harbour. This is David Harbour unfiltered. And if you're the kind of person who enjoys the darker Christmas movies, then you're in for one heck of a sleigh ride. The Christmas puns here are pretty good. But just remember, it's not for children. Like, definitely. You might be like, my kid can take it. It's not a good idea. Don't do it. And it's not even for some adults. Just proceed with caution is what I would say. I'll be curious to see how long this stays in theaters. I'm curious. I predicted it stays in theaters, and then right at Christmas time, like for Christmas Eve, Universal sends that to digital. Maybe a few days before Christmas. That's what I would do. Because I think this is going to do moderate box office. So it'll do like maybe 2 weeks in theaters, 2.5 weeks. And then bam, you can watch it Christmas Eve at home and be appalled. But it has good moments. And as I said, I would watch a sequel. I would greenlight a sequel unless this is just a total bomb. Because it's clearly a very cheap film. All right, so that's my non-spoiler review of Violent Night. I had a time. Hitting theaters only, we'll see for how long, this Friday. Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.